Yesterday was 65 days until the Pittsburgh Penguins opened the season against the Philadelphia Flyers. 65, obviously, the number of the Penguins team MVP last year. I'm not shy to say that. It was Erik Karlsson. There was no player more important to the Pittsburgh Penguins' miraculous second-place season in the Metro Division than Erik Karlsson. Finished with 66 points in 75 games, which was a large leap from his first 2 years in Pittsburgh. He had 56 his first season in the black and gold and 53 the following year. But not only that, he was among the top penalty-killing defenders for one of the top 10 penalty kills in all of hockey. And specifically, if you want to whittle it down to a performance in a month, the month of March, with Sidney Crosby largely on the shelf, with Evgeny Malkin dealing with injuries and suspensions, and with other injuries plaguing the Penguins, Erik Karlsson scored 24 points in 17 games. 9 of those 24 points were goals. So yeah, he was the Penguins MVP. And if the Penguins wish to follow up last season and, as we all would expect, take a step forward from what they did last season, it's going to likely have to be a similar story. Erik Karlsson is likely going to have to be that guy. He's going to have to be the Penguins' de facto MVP. It has to be him and Sid going head to head. But could this be his last season in the city of Pittsburgh? Josh Yohe, Penguins beat writer for The Athletic, spoke about that briefly last week for that website. And honestly, reading that and then thinking about it, it makes a lot of sense. Erik Karlsson is in the final year of his contract. He will be 37 by the time that contract expires next offseason. And let's not forget the primary reason that he came to the Pittsburgh Penguins, because he had a full no-move clause when he was a member of the San Jose Sharks. In fact, he still has a no-move clause today. But during that entire trade saga with Erik Karlsson a few summers back, he had a full no-move clause, so he controlled where he went. The reason he came to Pittsburgh was because he wanted to compete for a championship. This is a Hall of Fame talent without the biggest piece of hardware that you can earn in all of hockey. And since then, the results, to say have been disappointing based on that goal, would be an understatement. 1 playoff berth in 3 years, 0 playoff series wins. They're not, externally at least, heavily considered as a contender this year, although I do think they're closer than people expect. I talked about that last week. I think they're closer than people think, but I wouldn't even say that this year they'd be considered a cup contender. I just think that people prognosticating that it's going to be 5, 6, 7 years into the future, I think that's a bit extreme, but I talk about that more on a video that you can go back and watch. And it would make sense if Erik Karlsson desired a fresh start after this year. At 37, it would make sense if he said, you know what? I'm going to become a hired gun in free agency, sign a 1-year deal, go to a team that was either right on the cusp or a team that had just won and is looking to repeat. I mean, we've seen that a lot with veteran defensemen in the history of the National Hockey League, but in particular, this summer, we saw that with a couple of veteran defensemen that have been, pretty big namesakes over their entire career. Brent Burns has signed a 1-year contract with the Colorado Avalanche, for the last 2 years, trying to get that Stanley Cup. John Carlson just signed a 2-year deal with the Tampa Bay Lightning. He's trying to get back to the cup that he was able to earn in 2018. So it would make sense if Erik Karlsson gets to the end of this contract, becomes a free agent, that's the route he takes. That he says, okay, could Carolina use a right shot defenseman with a lot of still a lot of offensive upside, even at the age of 37? Does Dallas come calling for Erik Karlsson Do they have the money to come calling for Erik Karlsson? That's another question. But that's the most likely scenario for EK65. But here's what I'll say, what a lot of people won't admit is the return isn't impossible. Is it likely? No. Because the Penguins right now are not a team that is widely considered to be close to contending for a Stanley Cup. Inside that locker room, inside that building, inside the front offices, they might have a different opinion. But they're not widely considered a team that going into this year is top 5 in Stanley Cup odds. But at the same time, there is a pathway for Erik Karlsson to come back to Pittsburgh. And I think a big reason for that is Sidney Crosby trying to get back to that promised land one last time, and the fact that a lot of players, including Erik Karlsson, just have an immense amount of respect for Crosby and believe that even with those external expectations of his team, he's Sidney Crosby, he's a serial winner, and there's always a chance that he can break through and do it. But the circumstances that need to happen, in my opinion, for Erik Karlsson to say, you know what, maybe I'll come back, is one, the Penguins being anywhere near playoff contention this year. Because that's another factor. If they struggle this year, Erik Karlsson is likely going to be traded. Like if they're getting to the trade deadline, because I don't think it's going to happen early in the season. I think Kyle Dubas, similar to what he did the year Jake Gensel was traded, similar to what he did last year, he's going to wait before making any drastic moves when it comes to key pieces to this team. And let's face it, Erik Karlsson is if not the key piece to this team going into this year, because look at the blue line now. Imagine it without Erik Karlsson. But similar to Anthony Mantha last year, you're going to wait to see what this team does. And as long as they're successful, you're not trading Erik Karlsson. So that's key number one. If they struggle this year, he's going to probably wind up getting traded, and then this entire thing is a moot point about him coming back. But if the Penguins are anywhere near playoff contention, there is no trade. So that's the first thing that needs to happen. And secondly, if they take another step, right? Last year was a massive jump from being a lottery team, a bottom 10 team in the NHL, to being not just a playoff team, but hosting a playoff series in round one last year, being a team that finished with 98 points in the standings. If they can build off of that, make the playoffs, win a series, and then compete in round two. Yeah, obviously we want to see them win round two. But if they win a series and then are competitive in round two, I could see that hired gun being Erik Karlsson coming back on a one-year deal with the Penguins. Because the Pens are going to have a crazy amount of salary cap space next year. If Erik Karlsson is willing to come back at a cheaper deal than what he's making right now on a one-year contract, and all of this that we saw above happens, that they take a step forward, that they win a series, that they're competitive in round number 2, likely against the Carolina Hurricanes, then yeah, the door should be open for Erik Karlsson to return. It's too early to know anything for certain about next summer. It truly is. Because look at last summer at this time. A lot of people, myself included, were sitting there saying, man, it feels like it could be the last season of Evgeny Malkin. He's in the last year of his deal. He's going to be 40 years old by the time a new deal would start. And the Penguins, at that point, hadn't really shown signs of life in this de facto shotgun rebuild, whatever you want to call it. And what a difference a year makes. The Penguins are much further forward, both in their prospect system as well as their NHL roster, and Evgeny Malkin bounced back in a massive way. And all of a sudden, he signs a one-year contract to return to the organization. So never say never with Erik Karlsson. I think the most likely scenario is that when he reaches free agency, he does go somewhere that's going to give him a higher chance at hoisting the Stanley Cup. But never say never. Don't count it out. at this point of the year because it's July of 2026. We'll have to wait till at least March of 2027 to even have an idea of the future of Erik Karlsson. So it could really go in any direction. And I don't want to fall into the same thing, the same trap that we fell into last year, in believing for most of the season that it was the last year of Evgeny Malkin, because it didn't end up being. So let's not believe until we start to get some of this season underway and see what the Penguins are and see what Erik Karlsson is before we start prognosticating what the future holds for the future Hall of Famer and the Pittsburgh Penguins.